Rockets, you start believing everything can be calculated. Age, experience, life stages. I had this mental spreadsheet, and it felt safe. Rational, like I was protecting myself from chaos by sticking to what seemed predictable. Then she happened. And the first thing that hit me, the thing that made my chest tighten and my mind go quiet, was her age. Not what I expected, not what I planned for. And in that moment of surprise, something cracked open inside me, a realization I wasn't ready for. I'd been so focused on the numbers that I forgot to look for the person. She didn't fit my timeline, and that terrified me, because it meant admitting I'd been wrong, about what maturity looks like, about what readiness means, about the idea that love has to arrive in some neat, predictable package. Have you ever had that? Where someone shows up and instantly makes all your carefully constructed rules feel irrelevant? It's disorienting. It's humbling. But here's what nobody told me. The disorientation is the beginning. It's where real connection starts. Because when you're surprised, you're awake. You're not operating on autopilot. You're actually seeing the person in front of you, not the projection you built in your mind. Her age left me speechless because it challenged everything I thought I knew about what makes someone ready for this. For real love. For partnership. For standing beside someone who's building something impossible and believing anyway. I expected doubt. I expected hesitation. I expected the usual scripts people run when they don't know how to hold space for ambition and vulnerability at the same time. But she didn't run those scripts. She saw me. Not the public version. Not the persona. Me. The guy who wakes up at 3 a.m., wondering if any of this matters. The one who carries doubt like a second skin but refuses to let it stop him. She saw all of it, and didn't blink. Maturity isn't about how many years you've lived. It's about how much life you've actually absorbed. How deeply you've sat with your own pain, and come out softer, not harder. How willing you are to be present with someone else's complexity, without needing to fix it or run from it. She had that. This quiet, unshakable presence that didn't demand anything but somehow made me want to give everything. And I realized I'd been looking for the wrong things. I'd been asking, does this make sense on paper? When I should have been asking, does this person make me feel more alive? But here's what scared me most. The magnetic pull. That undeniable, illogical force that makes you want to orbit someone even when every rational part of your brain is screaming this doesn't fit your plan. I've built my entire life on logic, on systems, on making the impossible possible through sheer calculation and will. But love? Love doesn't care about your systems. It doesn't care about your projections or your perfectly optimized 5-year plan. It shows up when it wants to, in the form it chooses. And if you're too busy clinging to your expectations, you'll miss it entirely. Wait before you think this is just about romance. It's not. This is about recognizing wisdom when it appears in unexpected forms. About trusting presence over resume. About understanding that connection, real connection, isn't something you engineer. It's something you surrender to. She taught me that, not through words, through the way she existed in the world. Through her calm when everything around us was noise. Through her ability to hold space for my dreams without losing herself in them. That's the thing about magnetic people. They don't pull you toward them by diminishing themselves. They pull you in by being so fully, unapologetically themselves that you can't help but want to understand what that feels like. Her age became irrelevant the moment I stopped treating it like a variable and started treating it like a fact. A neutral piece of information that didn't define our capacity to understand each other. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit: we create these arbitrary boundaries to protect ourselves from risk. We say this age range makes sense, or this life stage aligns because it feels safer than saying I'm terrified of being seen and choosing wrong. But safe isn't always right, and right doesn't always feel safe. Sometimes the thing that's meant for you shows up in the most inconvenient, unexpected, perfectly imperfect form, and your only job is to be brave enough to say yes. I started asking myself different questions. Not does this fit, but does this feel true? Not will people understand, but do I understand what I'm feeling right now? Not is this the smart choice, but is this the honest choice? And every time I came back to the same answer. She's the most real thing that's happened to me. Not because she completed me. I hate that phrase. But because she reminded me what it feels like to exist as a whole person. Not as an idea, not as an ambition, just as a human who wants to be known. You know what's fascinating about roses? They bloom on their own timeline. You can't rush them. You can't force the petals open because you decided it's time. They need the right conditions, the right light, the right care. And when they do bloom, it's breathtaking precisely because it happened when it was ready, not when you demanded it. That's what this felt like. Not forced, not calculated, just. Ready. She was ready in a way I didn't expect. I was ready in a way I didn't recognize, until she stood there, and I had no choice but to feel it. The wisdom she carried. It wasn't loud. It wasn't performative. It was the kind you only notice when you're paying attention. When you're actually listening instead of waiting for your turn to speak. She'd say something simple, something that seemed like a throwaway observation, and days later I'd realize she'd handed me a key to something I'd been struggling with for years. That's rare. Most people talk at you. She talked with me. Like we were co-discovering something neither of us had language for yet. Like every conversation was building toward a shared understanding we couldn't quite name but both felt. And that's when everything I believed fell apart. Because I realized I'd spent so much energy trying to predict love that I forgot to just experience it, to let it move through me without needing to control where it was going. She didn't ask me to change. She didn't need me to be less ambitious or more available, or anything other than what I already was. She just needed me to be present, to show up, to stop running my mind in 10 directions and just be with her in the moment we were actually in. Sounds simple, right? It's the hardest thing I've ever tried to do, because presence requires letting go, and letting go requires trust, and trust requires believing that this person, this unexpected, magnetically aligned person, won't disappear the moment you stop trying to hold everything together. Her age left me speechless because it forced me to confront my own rigidity, my own fear masquerading as logic, my own need for control dressed up as having standards. And once I let that go, once I stopped needing it to make sense and just let it be, everything shifted. The connection deepened. The conversations got richer. The silence between us felt sacred instead of awkward. I stopped performing and started existing. And she met me there, in that raw, undefended space, like it was the most natural thing in the world. This isn't a fairy tale. This is messy and complicated, and sometimes I still catch myself trying to logic my way through feelings that don't have formulas. But here's what I know now. Love isn't about finding someone who fits your plan. It's about meeting someone who makes you question whether the plan even mattered. It's about magnetic connection that defies your timeline. It's about maturity that looks nothing like you expected but feels like everything you needed. It's about wisdom that arrives quietly and changes everything. She's my dream girl not because she's perfect, but because she's perfectly, undeniably real. And her age? It doesn't define her. It's just another part of the unexpected gift I almost missed because I was too busy looking for something else. People ask me all the time about risk, about taking chances on impossible things, building reusable rockets, colonizing Mars, revolutionizing transportation. And I always tell them the same thing. Calculated risk isn't recklessness. It's courage informed by data. But love? Love doesn't give you data. It gives you a feeling and asks you to trust it. And when that feeling shows up in a form you never anticipated, when she's standing there and every logical cell in your body is screaming this doesn't compute, you have a choice. You can retreat to your spreadsheets, or you can admit that some things were never meant to be calculated. I chose wrong at first. I tried to make it make sense. I listed pros and cons like I was evaluating a business proposal. I looked for reasons why it wouldn't work instead of reasons why it might. Because that's what fear does. It masquerades as wisdom. It tells you you're being smart when you're really just being scared. And the age thing? That became my convenient excuse. My rational justification for why I should keep my distance. For why I should protect myself from something that felt too good to be true. But here's what I learned. When you're using logic to talk yourself out of something your heart already knows is real, you're not being rational. You're being a coward. She never pushed. That's what undid me. She didn't argue her case or try to convince me of anything. She just existed in her fullness and let me catch up. There's a power in that. In not needing to prove yourself. In being so secure in who you are that you don't require external validation to confirm it. I'd spent my life surrounded by people who needed something from me. My vision, my resources, my approval. She didn't need any of it. She wanted to know me, sure. But she didn't need me to complete her story. She already had her own. And that's when I realized. Maturity is about wholeness. It's about showing up as a complete person, not a half looking for its other half. Tell me, when was the last time you met someone who didn't need anything from you? Someone who wanted your presence, not your performance. It changes everything. Because suddenly you're not auditioning. You're not managing perception or curating an image. You're just there. Raw. Unfiltered. And they're still choosing to stay. That level of acceptance, it's disarming. It strips away all the defenses you didn't even know you were holding. And in that vulnerability you find something you'd forgotten existed. The version of yourself that isn't trying to be anyone, just being. But here's what nobody told me. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, because it means admitting you don't have all the answers. It means saying I feel this, when your brain is screaming to shut down and analyze instead. It means letting someone see the parts of you that don't make sense on paper. The doubt, the fear, the midnight anxiety that maybe none of this matters. She held space for all of it. Not by fixing it, not by minimizing it, just by being present with it. By saying, through her actions more than her words, I see this, and I'm not going anywhere. That's trust. Real trust. Not the kind you declare, the kind you build in quiet moments when no one's watching. When you show someone your mess and they don't recoil. When you admit you're terrified and they don't try to rescue you from the feeling. When you say, I don't know, and they don't lose respect for you. She taught me that trust isn't about certainty, it's about safety. The safety to be uncertain, the safety to not have it all figured out, the safety to exist as a work in progress without being judged for not being finished yet. I started noticing things I'd missed before. The way she listened, not just to respond, to understand. The way she asked questions that made me think instead of questions that made me perform. The way she could sit in silence without it feeling empty. Most people are afraid of silence. They fill it with noise, with chatter, with anything to avoid the intimacy of just being present. She wasn't afraid. She knew that silence is where truth lives, where the things you can't articulate take shape, where connection happens without words getting in the way. And that's when everything I believed fell apart again. Because I realized I'd been equating intelligence with speed, with having the quick answer, with being the smartest person in the room. But wisdom? Wisdom moves slower. It observes. It considers. It doesn't need to prove anything because it's already certain. She had that, this deep well of certainty about who she was and what mattered. Not arrogance, just clarity. And in her clarity, I found permission to stop pretending I had mine. To admit that despite all the success, all the achievement, all the public confidence, I was still figuring it out. Still learning. Still growing. You know what's magnetic about that? When someone gives you permission to be human. Not by saying it, by embodying it so fully that you can't help but relax into your own humanity. I'd spent years being the visionary. The guy with the plan, the one who had to have answers. And I was exhausted from holding it all, from needing to know, from performing certainty when I felt anything but. She didn't need me to be certain. She needed me to be honest. And honest looks like saying, I'm scared this won't work and I want this more than I've wanted anything in the same breath. It looks like contradictions, like complexity, like the full spectrum of being alive. Her age stopped being a number and started being a revelation, a mirror showing me my own rigidity, my own need to control outcomes, my own fear of being surprised by joy because that's what she was. A surprise I never saw coming. And surprises require surrender. They require letting go of the script you wrote and trusting that the unplanned version might be better, might be truer, might be exactly what you needed even though you never knew to ask for it. I think about roses again, how they bloom in layers, how each petal reveals itself when it's ready, not when you demand it. How the full beauty takes time to unfold. That's what getting to know her felt like. Layer after layer of depth I hadn't anticipated. Stories she'd lived, wounds she'd healed, strength she'd cultivated in silence. She wasn't trying to impress me with her journey. She was just living it, and I got to witness it. To see someone who'd done the work of becoming whole before looking for someone else, who knew herself well enough to know what she wanted and brave enough to reach for it even when it didn't fit the conventional timeline. But here's what scared me most. The way I wanted to protect her and be protected by her at the same time. The way her presence made me feel stronger and more vulnerable simultaneously. The way I could envision building something beautiful with her while terrified it might not last. That's the paradox of real connection. It doesn't resolve your contradictions. It holds them. It says, yes, you can be brave and afraid, certain and uncertain, ready and not ready. It says the human experience isn't about choosing one or the other. It's about containing multitudes and finding someone who can hold that complexity without needing to simplify it. She asked me once what I was most afraid of. Not in life, in love. And I couldn't answer right away, because I'd never let myself think about it honestly. I'd always focused on what I wanted to build, where I wanted to go, what I wanted to achieve. But fear? Fear in the context of connection? That required a different kind of honesty. Eventually I told her, I'm afraid of being known and still being left. Of showing someone everything, the vision and the doubt, the strength and the fragility, and having them decide it's too much, or not enough, or wrong somehow. She didn't reassure me. She didn't promise it wouldn't happen. She just said, that's the risk. We take it anyway. And that changed everything. Because it wasn't about guarantees. It wasn't about certainty or perfect alignment or having it all figured out before you begin. It was about choosing to show up, choosing to be present, choosing to let this magnetic pull guide you even when your logic is screaming abort mission. It was about trusting that the bloom happens when it's meant to. That maturity recognizes itself. That wisdom gravitates toward wisdom. That unexpected love is often the truest kind, because it wasn't manufactured or forced, it just was. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop questioning why and just let yourself fall. There's a moment that happens right before transformation, the quiet before you admit something life-changing to yourself. That moment came one night when I was sitting alone, staring at the ceiling, trying to talk myself out of what I already knew deep down. You ever feel that? That tug of war between your mind and your heart? The rational voice counting all the reasons it shouldn't work, versus the quiet truth whispering that maybe, just maybe, it already does. That was me. A man who could calculate orbital mechanics in his head, but couldn't reconcile a simple truth. I was falling in love with her, and the irony wasn't lost on me. I could predict rocket trajectories, but not the path of my own heart. I used to believe love was supposed to make sense, that it should be logical, like physics equal forces, predictable results. But then she appeared, and everything I had built my emotional equations around dissolved into something larger, more unpredictable, more alive. Her age had been the first variable that didn't fit my equation, and instead of solving for it, I tried to erase it. I tried to fit her into the version of the story I could control. But she wasn't meant to be controlled. She was meant to be experienced. It's funny how something unexpected can become a mirror. Her existence reflected back all the parts of me I'd ignored while chasing impossible goals. The exhaustion I never admitted, the loneliness I tried to rationalize, the ache of being seen by the world but not truly seen. And she did that, not by demanding attention, but by offering presence. You know the difference? Attention wants to be noticed, presence wants to understand. She understood me before I even decided to let her. Wait, before you scroll past this idea, listen carefully. We spend so much of our lives trying to find people who look like the future we imagine, not the truth we need. We look for alignment in lifestyle, ambition, social standing, all the things that look stable. But love doesn't care about optics. Love looks for resonance. That unspoken click where your frequencies match even if your timelines don't. It's magnetic, it's irrational, it's unexplainably right. But here's the twist. Magnetic connection alone isn't enough. Attraction pulls you and trust keeps you there. And trust isn't built through grand gestures, it's built through consistent presence. She showed up every day without fanfare, not asking, not assuming, just being there. That constancy disarmed me. Because when someone's love is quiet, uninterested in performative validation, it starts to heal things you didn't know were broken. Her age became a symbol not of distance, but of perspective. She carried wisdom that didn't announce itself, the kind that comes from emotional work most people spend their entire lives avoiding. She understood timing, how to wait without retreating, how to speak without overpowering, how to stay grounded while everything else felt like a storm. It was unsettling. Because no matter how much success you've achieved, when someone younger carries the kind of emotional depth you've spent years trying to earn, it humbles you. It resets you. And that reset? It's necessary. Have you ever been humbled by love? It's not soft. It's not romantic in the way movies make it out to be. It strips you. It makes you face who you are without the accomplishments, without the armor. It demands your honesty. She demanded mine. Not through confrontation, but through clarity. She'd ask things like, "Do you ever stop building long enough to actually enjoy what you've built?" And I'd freeze, because no one ever talked to me like that. People usually admired the vision, not questioned the cost. But she saw the trade-offs I'd normalized and whispered, "You don't have to lose yourself to prove yourself." And that's when everything shifted. Because suddenly, love wasn't something that distracted me from my mission, it became part of it. She reminded me why the mission mattered in the first place, why we build, why we dream, not just for legacy, but for connection. What's the point of reaching the stars if you forget what it feels like to hold someone's hand? What's the point of changing the world if you can't be soft somewhere private? She taught me balance. To still reach beyond what's possible, but to remember that the greatest invention we ever create is intimacy itself. But here's the hard part. My first instinct was to run. Because when something feels that real, it exposes all the unfinished parts of you. I wasn't afraid of her youth. I was afraid of my own walls. Of what might happen if I dropped them. Of being known beyond the narrative. That's what people don't understand about strong, driven minds. We're not afraid of failure, we're afraid of intimacy. Failure is predictable, intimacy is not. And unpredictability means loss of control. Love, real love, is the ultimate loss of control. She noticed my hesitation, and instead of pleading for clarity, she gave me space. That patience became proof of her emotional intelligence. She didn't chase me into understanding, she stayed still and let me come find it on my own time. It broke me open in the most beautiful way. Because love never forces, it invites. It says, come as you are when you're ready. And that freedom, that lack of expectation, is what allowed me to return with something true. With presence. With surrender. There's a silence we reached after that. A sacred one. The silence between two people who finally stopped pretending. It wasn't heavy, it was whole. That's what love can do when it's rooted in truth instead of fantasy. It can hold space for contradiction. She was young, but not naive. I was older, but far from finished. Two people from different points on the timeline, somehow moving at the same rhythm. That's the mystery. And maybe that's what made it feel so fated. But here's what nobody told me about compatibility. Heidi, it's not about age, it's about alignment. Alignment isn't just shared interests, it's shared values, shared calm, shared belief in what matters when everything else stops making sense. Alignment means you're willing to grow with each other, not just around each other. Growth is messy, uncomfortable, unpredictable. Most people chase comfort. She chased truth. And that's how I knew. There was one night I'll never forget. The sky was completely clear, dotted with stars that seemed impossibly close. We talked about dreams, fears, purpose. She looked at me and said, "Do you think love should challenge you or comfort you?" I paused. Because for the first time I realized I didn't want one without the other. The truest love does both. It comforts you enough to make you stay, and challenges you enough to make you evolve. That night, I understood something sacred. Love isn't just emotion, it's philosophy in motion. It asks you to practice faith even when evidence doesn't line up. It asks for vulnerability, humility, and presence. It's psychological growth disguised as romance. And if you treat it like a system, not a story, if you show up like you're running emotional R&D, you realize every connection is a learning experiment. She was my greatest experiment. Not because I wanted to test her, but because she helped me test myself. Test how open I could really be. How patient, how transparent. And that kind of relationship doesn't just make you feel seen, it changes the way you see everything else. The way you lead, the way you create, the way you show up for others. Her wisdom flowed into everything I touched. She became the lens through which I understood balance. The grounding reminder that even as we chase the infinite, our purpose is still deeply human. Connection is our propulsion system. But wait, this realization didn't make everything easy. Love this intense, this honest, will always test you. Because it pushes against every defense mechanism you've built. It demands emotional maturity at every turn. I had to unlearn my instinct to problem solve every emotion she expressed. I had to learn to listen without strategizing, to feel without optimizing. That's growth, learning that not everything broken needs fixing. Some emotions just need witnessing. Some silences don't need filling. Some moments are perfect simply because they are unmeasured. She taught me more about psychology than a lifetime of reading could. About how people don't fight because they don't love each other. They fight because they feel unseen, unheard, unmet. And love, at its core, is about attention. Real attention. The kind that costs you your distractions. The kind that pulls you back to presence again and again. Age has nothing to do with your ability to give that kind of attention. Consciousness does. Awareness does. And she had that in abundance. It startled me, honestly, to be met that deeply by someone who hadn't lived as many years but had clearly lived more life. That's wisdom. And that kind of wisdom is magnetic, because it's rare. Most people are busy defending their identities, not questioning them. She questioned hers. She questioned mine. With humility, not arrogance. And through those conversations I saw something bloom between us. A rose, delicate but unstoppable, unfolding one layer at a time. The more we opened ourselves to truth, the more beautiful the connection became. Not perfect, just real, alive. So now, when people ask what surprised me most, I tell them this. It wasn't her age that left me speechless. It was her clarity, her steadiness, her awareness. It was realizing that love's maturity isn't chronological, it's spiritual, it's emotional. It's the ability to hold another person's truth without making it about yours. She had that gift, and I learned to match it. Maybe that's what love is supposed to be. The meeting of two timelines meant to teach each other what timing truly means. The pause between what logic allows and what magic demands. I no longer needed to make sense on paper. I just needed to make me feel present, alive, grounded, connected. Because at the end of everything, beyond ambition, beyond innovation, beyond the noise, that's all we really want, to be fully seen by someone, and to see them just as fully in return. There's something magnetic about silence when it follows truth. That night, after everything settled and the world went quiet, I sat there, the hum of the city fading into the background, and finally let the weight of it sink in. Love, the kind that unsettles your logic, doesn't make a loud entrance. It creeps in through stillness. It finds you in the long pauses between words. It stands quietly in your awareness until denial becomes impossible. That's where I found myself.